on some benefits we gain from reading the classical Greek and Roman authors. May the joyful consciousness of much accomplished good and the peaceful retrospect on years past, the reward of a life marked by deeds, the delightful fruits of their efforts, now partly ripened and partly still in bloom, and the blessings of all the upright, sweeten for them the burdens of increasing years, and with the brightest serenity, may they look forward to the eternity that recompenses all. The esteem in which the ancient Greek and Roman writers have been held with nearly equal strength throughout all centuries, though admittedly not always for the same reasons, makes them necessarily significant for us. If they possessed no merits other than those once recognized in them, if they had no other use than that which was long made of them, they would likely only draw our attention in the way an old but useless armory might. But without some intrinsic worth, they could hardly have maintained their place in our age, which finds them particularly well suited for intellectual formation, for the following reasons. First, they are especially useful in enabling us to gather the concepts that constitute the material processed by the other powers of the soul. Even a modest familiarity with these works and personal experience show that these authors consistently drew their depictions from nature itself and reported only observations they had gathered firsthand. The study of their constitutions and educational systems shows us even more clearly how far removed their knowledge was from what Lessing in Nathan the Wise called the dead bookishness that stamps the brain with lifeless symbols, the sum of meaningless words with which our minds are filled from youth, and from which, for the most part, our system of thought is composed. The form of their intellectual development necessarily imprinted itself on their writings. Their descriptions of both visible and moral nature are for this reason more vivid and more immediately graspable. In their abstract inquiries, whether moral or metaphysical, we find that their path of speculation always proceeds from experience, draws conclusions from observation, and builds further upon them. Moreover, due to the distinctive character and trajectory of their culture, which was only minimally influenced from without, they necessarily viewed things from different relational perspectives and expressed these in their language. They thus had concepts we cannot possess, for we lack the corresponding words. Even if we happen upon such a relation or analogy by chance, the impression, for want of a word, is too fleeting for us to fix the vague concept in our minds. In this respect, language is for us a limited collection of fixed concepts, through which we model everything we perceive or notice. One essential benefit of learning foreign languages is precisely this enrichment of our concepts, especially when the culture of the people who speak the language differs from our own. The ancients, and above all the Greeks, who are principally meant here, since Roman writings, considered apart from their content, are mostly imitations of the Greek, possessed in their language a remarkable wealth of terms for expressing visible changes in natural objects and phenomena, the subtlest shades of difference, and above all, the various modifications of emotions, states of mind, and character. Our language also has a considerable stock of such words, but it would be far richer were not many of them considered provincial or vulgar, and thus banned from the language of polite society and the books it reads. Attempts to translate such concepts into our own language give rise to a more precise examination of the subtleties of meaning and to a more accurate usage of words. It is self-evident how such study of distinctions sharpens the understanding and strengthens intellectual acuity. Beyond this, the ancient writers from the flourishing epochs of their nation's cultures offer the great advantage of forming taste. Taste, in general, is the feeling for the beautiful. Already this is gain enough. The sensitive power of the soul is thereby awakened and strengthened. Genuine expression of feeling always touches the heart and awakens sympathy, which, under the pressures of modern life, is so often suppressed. And where could we expect better models of beauty from a nation in which everything bore the stamp of beauty, where the aesthetic faculties had every occasion to flourish, and sages and heroes made offerings to the graces? With regard to history, their historians are extremely valuable relics. They are of particular interest to us in two respects. First, in terms of historical craftsmanship, in which probably no nation surpassed them, and only a few match them. The causes, motives, and course of events always unfold before our eyes in a perfectly natural manner. The characters and passions of the individuals involved reveal themselves through their actions without the need for the historian to underline their traits. At the same time, the whole is conveyed in the noblest simplicity, both in expression and in thought. Second, they are important with respect to the history of humanity. We see the human spirit develop in very specific conditions and circumstances. From the sequence and character of the extant writings, we can abstract a complete history of their culture and illuminate many phenomena elsewhere. For example, many aspects of the culture, habits, morals, and customs of the Israelite people, which have had and still have such influence on us, can be explained and rendered more comprehensible by comparison. For the human spirit has always, in general, remained the same. Only its development has been variously modified by the diversity of conditions. Finally, since, as has already been said, the works of the ancients are particularly suited for acquiring concepts, we can see how highly suitable they are as a preparation for the study of philosophy. Through them, one already acquires a stock of abstract ideas and a thinking power that is at least somewhat exercised, especially since they contain in many areas of this science at least the seeds and first principles that have only more clearly been articulated and developed in modern times. The many contradictions among the ancient philosophers, particularly in their speculations on the practical part of philosophy, have at least made it easier to find the middle way where truth lies. These are my remarks on some of the advantages offered by the study of the ancients. In more than a few places, they will likely lack proper precision and completeness. This is neither the place, nor am I capable of saying much about what the more mature person finds in them in terms of content, one who can compare their observations with his own experiences and judge the various views and systems of happiness which mankind has pursued, observed, or himself partly lived through.
Notes. Lessing's critique of dead bookishness in Nathan the Wise, 1779, Gotthold Ephraim Lessing contrasts genuine, lived understanding with rote learning of vocabulary. Hegel invokes this to emphasize that Greek and Roman authors wrote from direct experience, rather than merely assembling lifeless terms. 2. Minimal external influence on classical culture. The Greek polis and early Roman Republic developed relatively in isolation until Hellenistic and Roman expansions. Consequently, their thinkers forged original philosophical, literary, and political concepts that do not always have exact linguistic equivalents in modern European languages. 3. Greek richness in descriptive vocabulary. Ancient Greek poets and philosophers, for example, Homer, Pindar, Plato, possessed specialized terms, phino, to appear, eidolon, image, pneuma, breath or spirit, to capture nuanced phenomena. Latin writers often adopted and Latinized these Greek terms, but Romans, lacking comparable native nuance, primarily imitated Greek models in style and expression. 4. Provincial and vulgar terms in modern German. In late 18th century German, many precise descriptors, beieinander fließen, to flow into one another, schlagfertig, ready-witted, existed first as regional dialect terms or lower-class speech, before being codified into high-style literature. Translating classical concepts forced careful lexical selection and clarified semantic boundaries. 5. Offerings to the Graces. The Graces, Greek, charites or graces, goddesses of charm, beauty, and creativity, received votive offerings, poetic, visual, and ritual dedications from artists and patrons. Hegel suggests that ancient society cultivated an aesthetic sensibility pervasive in both public and private life, with temples, festivals, and monuments reinforcing a stamp of beauty. 6. Classical historiographical simplicity. Historians like Herodotus, Thucydides, and Livy prioritized clear narrative and cause and effect reporting. Thucydides' History of the Peloponnesian War and Livy's Ab Orb Condita present characters through actions, such as Pericles' funeral oration, Thucydides 2.34-46, without overt moralizing, achieving the noblest simplicity praised by later critics. 7. Comparative cultural analysis. By examining Greco-Roman texts alongside Hebrew scripture, for example, Exodus, Kings, Chronicles, one can trace parallels in legal codes, covenantal religion, and literary motifs, such as the ascent and descent narrative. Hegel anticipates modern comparative philology and cultural history by noting that the human spirit remained the same despite differing environmental conditions. 8. Ancient philosophy as pre-philosophical groundwork. Pre-Socratic fragments, for example, Heraclitus, Parmenides, contain nascent ideas about being and change. Socratic dialogues introduce ethical inquiry. Epicurean and Stoic schools offer competing moral systems. Studying these seeds aids in navigating modern philosophical debates and finding a middle way between extremes. Cf. Aristotle's concept of the golden mean in Nicomachean Ethics.
This audiobook was translated by Simon Gros, narrated by Leda Eliza, and presents the earliest essays, dialogues, and philosophical writings of Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, composed between the ages of 15 and 18. It is based on the German edition G.W.F. Hegel, Frühe Schriften 1, 1989, edited by Friedhelm Niccolin and Gisela Schuler, published as part of the Gesammelte Werke, Volume 1, by Felix Marner Verlag, Hamburg, in cooperation with the Rheinisch-Westfälische Akademie der Wissenschaften, the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, the Hegel Kommission, and the Hegel Archive of Ruhr University Bochum. Thank you for listening.